everybody. Great to be here. How to slay your next 100 days. Seemed like a great title at the time. If there's any RuPaul's Drag Race fans in the house. Obviously not. Okay. So moving on. So it's great to be here today. I was talking to Natasha about doing a little talk on something which I found really useful, and hopefully maybe some people in the room will find it useful as well today. So the last 3 or 4 jobs that I've had have been consulting jobs, and I think as I got into each of those consulting jobs, I've realised that I've started to develop a bit of a framework that has been really, really useful. The original title of this presentation was How to Slay Your first 100 days, but Natasha pointed out that actually you could apply this to any situation in work. So I'd love to say this is all my own thinking, but it's not. Originally, the idea came from a really, really good book called Your First 100 Days by a lady called Niamh O'Keefe. I don't know if anyone's read that book, but I'd really recommend it. It's a book which basically gives you a framework of how to structure your first 100 days, and Niamh kind of did this work with loads of different companies, and I found it a really, really useful framework. And then what I did was start to add that into a talent maturity matrix tool as well. So maturity matrices are quite commonplace, and I found that by combining the 100-day plan resulting in an output of this maturity matrix, it really helped me engage stakeholders, construct business cases for change, and just really keep momentum behind what was going on in your first 100 days. And obviously that's a really, really critical part of your new role. So what I'll do next is sort of talk you through what the elements of that plan are. So there are 9 elements of the 100-day plan. I don't know what anybody in the room is like, but often in TA, we're kind of like so in the day-to-day and, putting out fires and just going from task to task to task that we don't often get the chance to be reflective or actually think about what makes us great at what we do. And one of the things that I found using this process is it gives you that opportunity to be a bit introspective and to think before you start a new job or before you take a step up, actually, what is it you're really good at and how can you use those strengths to kind of really accelerate your growth in role. So the first thing that Niamh says you should really think about is, what is the transition that you're actually going to make in this role? Might it be that you're stepping into a more specialist type of recruitment role? Might it be more program or project based? Or is it that you're going to be needing to fix different types of solutions with different types of roles? Is it volume? Is it specialist? And so on and so forth. So it's really good to think specifically about what is the transition that you're going to make. And the second element really is all about what makes you unique in your skill set. If you're really good at brand or you're really good at selection, what are the parts of the TA skill set that really get you out of bed in the morning and really make you fired up? So it's really good to think about what are your personal strengths and then how can you take those and apply those in the next role too. Content learner. So there's so many changes in what we do all the time. It's really important to keep up to date on the latest tips and techniques and approaches to different elements of TA. So what might you need to learn in order to get you ready to smash that next role? And then business achiever. So again, when you start the new role, you can often go in there with quite a few assumptions over what it is you're being required to deliver. But I find often when you go in, your boss might be telling you actually, the focus here is volumes of hiring, but then you might talk to another stakeholder that's talking about quality of hire. Another person might be concerned with time to fill. So in order for you to really set that compass point to get a great 100 days and beyond, you want to really, really survey and get a good feel for, what are the specific results that you're going to be asked to achieve. Then you've got team builder. So most of us are in roles where we're either running direct or virtual teams. I think for me, I'm still kind of grappling with the whole post-COVID TA leadership thing where you're not in the same room as your team and you wanted to try and motivate people and understand the quality of the work that's going on. So I find it really useful to think about the team. What's the structure? What's the capability? What are all the things that we're going to need in our team again to really support the delivery of success in the role? Value adder, so how are you going to contribute effectively to strategy development and add value as a leader? Relationship builder, so often, we're not working in silos in order for us to deliver great results. We're working with hiring manager communities, we might be working with exec teams or investor teams. So who are those key relationships that you need to build in order to help you really, really deliver and learn the organisation rapidly? Culture navigator, so it's always really fascinating for me when you move from company to company. It's always a different feel. At the minute, I've gone from working for one of Europe's largest dentistry healthcare businesses to one of America's largest healthcare businesses, and I was like, oh great, I can really do this, I know what I'm doing. And one of the really interesting things for me is, American business culture is really, really, really different. So the way you go about engaging and delivering results is quite different. So that's a good example of where, thinking through the culture of the organisation has been a really important thing for me. And then finally, market player. So what can I achieve in terms of a market impact or early win? What does that look like in terms of results? So for me, I'd normally spend, 2 or 3 hours just really sort of thinking about, okay, before I start this next assignment or next role or promotion, what might I want to consider in each of these different 9 elements? So I normally put those into a little PowerPoint deck or turn them into a bit of a survey. The next thing that I think about is, generally speaking, in what we do, you can put it into different work streams or different sets of activities. And for me, I've always kind of used these 5 pillars. So plan, attract, source, select, and onboard. And then, in each of these pillars, there's loads of different things that we can potentially do as recruiters to drive success. But each time you move into a different role, you're going to need to dial up and dial down different things that you're doing, because one job might have really big issues over strategic workforce planning. The next job might be more to do with brand and attraction. So what I like to do when I go in is to think, when I'm starting the job, I'm going to spend probably the first 30 days really trying to create a baseline and speaking to loads of people in my team, speaking to loads of people in the business, and I just have a standard set of questions that I ask around these different pillars. And as I'm going through those stakeholder interviews, that's giving me loads of useful data points that I can then come back, sort of zoom out, reflect on those data points, and then help me to think of all the things that I could do, what order can I do them in to have the biggest impact within that 100 days to really achieve buy-in and to deliver some great results. So as you go through the 100 days, you're collecting evidence and data within each of these different pillars. And then as you're doing that, you're forming a view as to whether, each of those pillars is either a baseline, i.e. it's really, really basic, it's going to need a whole load of improvements. Developing, which is it's not terrible, but it's probably okay, but it needs a bit more development work. Or maturing, it's probably not something which is going to be, something that really, really needs a lot of attention for the time being. And for me, whether I'm engaging my boss or in some jobs I might be having to engage a whole exec team or investors, like one of the things we often have to be really good at is creating that exec summary, on a page, trying to summarize it all down. And I find this quite a useful visual tool to help those sort of senior teams understand, actually, of all the things that we can do, these are the 2 or 3 things that if we really focus on in the next 100 days, we're going to deliver some quick wins and lay a solid foundation to then keep developing strategy moving forward. So what does that all look like? So what it will start to look like is a plan which you basically split into chunks. And again, for me, this is it's dead simple, which I am dead simple, so it works really well for me. So basically, the first 2 columns really is those initial thoughts that you're going to have when you've got your bottle of wine and you're kind of doing a brainstorm in each of those different areas. So this work stream here would be for the business achiever element, and this is actually sort of relative to the current role that I'm in. Based on the information that I'd got from the exec team before I started, I'd kind of thought, right, what are the things that I need to really investigate to begin with, and what might those outcomes be? So that would be the stuff in the sub-outcomes column, and then the first steps. And basically, the problems that we have in the company that I work for at the minute, it's a company called Smile Brands, so we're a really big, we're the 3rd biggest actually in the US, big dentistry business. It's got huge problems around TA. So to give you an idea of what I was walking into, we operate around about 800 dental offices across the whole of the United States, and 20% of those offices could not operate because they didn't have people. It was that critical. So the business was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a week because they couldn't recruit. And essentially what had happened was COVID had hit, and clinical recruitment for any healthcare recruiters in the room, it's really, really hard. There were global talent shortages. So pretty much overnight, they'd lost their ability to recruit. So a lot of the stuff that I was doing was around, how can we really understand, of all of these vacancies, where do we start? Because it was just like there were fires everywhere, and it was like, well, we're going to need to try and figure out, how do we prioritise? How do we work out which are the ones we're going to have to go after first? And there were also huge problems around our employer brand and reputation in the marketplace as well, which was affecting us. So you can see here, kind of said, look, in the first 30 days, it's all about baselining. By the time I get to the end of the first 30 days, I just provide a really summary report of maybe 3 or 4 pages in this format to the exec team, and just say, look, these are my observations. Based on my observations so far, I think the next 30 days we need to focus on this, this, and this. So you get really, really good alignment from your exec team, but you're also able to demonstrate that you can deliver some great results. And then really from days 30 to 60, I always like at that point to be starting to set the team some targets. So you want to deliver some quick wins in your first 100 days. So we'd identified early on that the big problem was we just weren't closing vacancies. So it was kind of like, team, what can we do to quickly rewire the machine and rethink how we can do that? And it was all about working on the right requisitions and having a real focus on the KPIs. And then again, at the end of 60 days, presenting an update back to the exec team with a progress report, making sure again they're still completely aligned, and investment cases, and then getting into the 90-day phase where you're starting to deliver quick impact wins, and then at 100 days starting to publish a wider strategy. So kind of where I am at the minute actually is coming up to the end of the 90 days, and I'll share some insights in a minute as to how we got on with this approach. But I'm in meetings tomorrow with our investors in the US where I'll be presenting, look, this is the whole 100-day review, so these are all the things that we've learned around the different pillars, and based on that, I think the next 2 years really looks like the following priorities, and this is the investment that we're going to need. So I think key learnings and outcomes from this specific example. So as I said, the big problems and opportunities we had were around the number of hires. So we need to hire around about 3,000 clinical professionals a year, which is a really big number. We've got really high turnover and big challenges over selection as well. We had some really, really big problems in the recruitment team, not being stable and not engaged. There was no strategic plan, multiple ways of working, no metrics, and no advertising strategy. So they were the key issues. So what I did was start to stream those down into just 3 simple work streams. So we landed on high performance team, process, and brand. And again, as I was sort of going through that 100 days, I kept bringing the stakeholders back to, look, if it doesn't affect one of these 3 pillars, we need to stop doing it because we're just trying to do too many things. So that was really, really useful. Then we launched some standardised stakeholder engagement, like I say, to make sure everyone's sort of really up to date at the end of those sort of 30-day periods. So we introduced some standardised reporting and metrics, which was really helpful. A monthly town hall, so Richard was talking about a committee, so I found that really useful. I'd get the senior executive leadership team on a call, talk them through progress and make sure they were aligned. Investment cases, getting introduced to the investors who were ultimately going to fund the plan, and ultimately securing investment for us to drive the strategy forward. So essentially, it ended up looking like a really, really clear and simple plan. It kind of just builds as you go. Each 30 days, you were updating that plan, and you were able to use that to re-engage your stakeholders and to make sure everyone's on board with what it is you're doing. And then the second piece is around the maturity matrix. So you can see here, for each of those different pillars, as you're going on the journey, you're updating your observations and you're adding into those your action plans. And I just find this a really, really simple way to plan, execute, and just to keep people engaged on what's happening. And I think for us, it's been really successful. So, these have been some of the highlights for me over the last 100 days. We had a really effective TA summit in California. We got all the team together. It was the first time we did it. It was a no-brainer. We got everyone engaged and restructured the team. We engaged our technology partners to create some effective dashboards for us pretty quickly within the first 2 months. And then we ran some incentives to take the team to Disney World if they broke a record, which they did in August. We delivered a 20% increase on the best ever month in terms of hires. And a lot of these quick wins were really, really basic things, but having this structure just allows you to pressure test every aspect of the TA strategy really rapidly and make sure that you're not missing anything. And I think, you know, the results are pretty good. So we got loads of additional investment signed off to help. We've already started to make a really, really good impact in terms of the numbers of hires. We've got the recruitment team and the exec team engaged as well, and we've secured really, really significant investment to move the business forward over the next 2 to 3 years. So like I say, it's quite a simple toolkit that works really, really effectively for me. It's based on the Niamh O'Keefe book and then some other different maturity matrix ideas that are floating around. But I'm really happy to share if anybody's moving into a new role or being promoted. I've got loads of templates and stuff which I'm really, really happy to share. So hope one or two of you found that useful today anyway. Those are my contact details. If anybody wants any other stuff to pinch off me and use in your current role, feel free to drop me an email. Thanks very much.
Thank you.